Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the New Yankee Workshop. How many people are you having over for holiday dinner? 8? 12? 16? If so, I think you'll be very interested in the project we have in store today. It's a dining table. For inspiration, we visited our friend Bob Tonkin in Nantucket. Now, he has antiques as well as antique reproductions. He showed us a beautiful mahogany dining table that he has made over in England. We'll go see that next, then we'll come back here and build our own dining table. That's next, right here in the New Yankee Workshop.
The New Yankee Workshop features the craftsmanship of Norm Abram.
Today we're at Tonkin Antiques on the island of Nantucket, and this place is filled with French and English antiques and reproductions. We're here for a table, and there are plenty of those. Look at this one, nice little table. It's a cherrywood table, French, 1850, nice. And over here, a very unusual elliptical-shaped table, and this is actually a French, it's walnut, a wine tasting table, and it has a tilt top, also 1880. Let's see if we can find Bob. He's usually back here in the shop.
Hey, Norm.
Good morning, Bob.
Welcome to Nantucket.
So are you relaxing in your library?
Are indeed. We are indeed.
So did you take this out of some old house over in England?
No, Norm, these are custom made from old pieces of wood, and we put them together to whatever size the customer wants.
Really? So these were not existing panels?
No, actually they were floorboards.
Huh. And how about the fireplace?
Again, bits and pieces from this and that, and we put it together whatever size you want.
That's really a great look. So if a customer comes in here and they have a room that they want to outfit like this, if they give you measurements, you can have it made up?
Yes. We just need architectural drawings, and then we give them a price, and we can have it shipped over from England.
That's terrific. Well, I'm here today looking for an extension table, either with leaves or with a pedestal, and bigger is better.
Well, we have a very large one. It's a George III copy, and it's on pedestals.
All right.
Like to come, I'll show it to you. There you are, Norman.
Wow, this is what I call a table. How big is this?
That table is 11 feet 2 inches long, 4 feet wide.
Wow, set up for over a dozen people, I guess.
Yes, very comfortably.
And what's the story with the china?
That's some spode, little bits and pieces.
Very fancy and elegant. Now, how is this supported? Oh, I see there's two large pedestals, one on each end. So what's the advantage of having a pedestal table rather than having legs?
Well, actually, you get a lot more flexibility with seating arrangements with the pedestals.
So you're not fighting that leg, and
right.
There's plenty of room. Everything's underneath.
Yes.
Top looks to be a nice mahogany.
It's solid mahogany.
Nice and thick with a thumbnail edge. And these leaves, about, what, 2 feet wide?
2 feet, yes.
That's nice. So there's only 2 leaves in this long table. Now, the thing that's always interesting is how they extend the table, and this one appears to be made all out of wooden pieces. How does that work?
Yes, it is. We have one next door, and it's not put together, so I think you can see the way it is built. If we'd like to come over, I'll show it to you.
I'd love to check that out.
All right, we're off.
Ah, this is familiar territory, the back room. I bet you this is where you keep all the bargains.
It is indeed.
And you have a little workshop area here, tools and
Always
stains.
repairing something.
Well, that's what you have to do to antiques, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, so
There
this
it
is another one of your tables.
Yeah.
And you've actually flipped it upside down on this bench. So there's the pedestal, just like the one we saw over there. I see it sits inside of a frame of heavy timbers held in with some thumb screws. And here's the end of the table and a leaf. This is what I'm interested in. I see, okay, so it's a piece of mahogany with a groove in it that fits into the tongue that surrounds the base. That couldn't be simpler. It's a great system.
They're very clever, those English.
Well, do you mind if I take a few photographs, maybe a few measurements?
Absolutely not.
And,
Absolutely not.
Appreciate your time. I look forward to building one of these in the workshop.
Wonderful. I'll be looking forward to seeing you doing it.
Well, here it is, our prototype dining table. Now, let me put it another way. Half of our table. After all, a double pedestal table is a mirror image of itself. I've built half of it. Today we'll build the other half. Now, one half of the top is 4 feet wide and 3 feet long. Sits on a nicely turned pedestal with graceful Queen Anne legs that have these beads along the top and these brass casters. And the table disassembles, so it's easy to store or move to another location. Here's one of the leaves, and it's all made out of nice, solid mahogany. We'll give you the source for that mahogany on the measured drawing and on our website. So if you'd like to build your own dining table, a measured drawing is available, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. And I want to start with the top, and here's how the boards came to us. In a press, there's these stickers held together with some bolts, and what that does is keeps the boards flat until I'm ready to build the table, and it lets them acclimate to the shop. Now we're ready to glue up another top. Let's take them out of the press and get started. All right, well, this piece is going to be for the other leaf of the table. These two pieces, along with the ones I've already used on the prototype, came from one single length. So all the texture of the grain is very similar. However, I do have to deal with matching the edges, and I think this is the best selection I have right now, but I do want to get rid of this little mark here. So I'll cut a couple inches off this edge. And on this board, I have to remove this chip because I only have a ½ inch extra in the length. So I'll rip away the bad material. But before I do that, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. These slots are for some biscuits, which will help me align the pieces when I clamp them up. You will note that I'm rolling on a brown carpenter's glue. And this is useful when working with dark woods that are also going to be stained very dark, which is going to be the case here. If any glue should show in the seam, it'll disappear because it'll match the wood. Okay, let's turn a column. Here's what we're going to use to make the pedestal. 2 pieces of mahogany about 2½ inches thick, glued together. To minimize the amount of material that I'm going to have to remove at the lathe, I'm knocking off the corners. All right, the blank is mounted in the lathe. I have a full-size drawing in front of me with all the details and measurements. And all I'm going to have to do is use my calipers at these various transitions. I won't need a ruler, just the drawing. First thing I want to do is round over this blank with my gouge. Okay, with it round, I now want to mark the various transition points. And this is where the full-scale pattern comes in handy. No measuring, just lay it out. All right, now I'm going to start with this feature right here with my parting tool. Let's take a look at the prototype pedestal. The leg is joined to the column with a sliding dovetail. The dovetail is formed on the end of the leg, and a corresponding slot is formed in the column, which runs the entire width of the leg. I'm going to make the slot in the column first using this jig, which mounts to the lathe, and a router. I've locked the spindle on the lathe so the column can't spin. The jig is centered under the column. This first big window is so that I can take a router with a 3/4 inch collar and a 1/2 inch bit and ride it inside that window to create a flat spot at 3 locations 120 degrees apart for the legs. Now my lathe has an indexing wheel, so if I turn it 120 degrees, I'll be ready for the next spot. Now I've substituted another guide with a narrower slot. Now here's the third guide, which is slightly wider. to allow for the dovetail. Here are one of the blanks for the legs. It starts out as 1 3/4 mahogany. I've made a full-size template of the leg, including the tenon that's going to be on the end. And I set it on this blank, and I like to get the grain to run more or less along the shape of the leg. I roughly mark the angle and take my bevel gauge, mark it across the whole piece, and now I'll trim it. Now I'm beginning to form the dovetail along that angled cut. I'm using the same router bit that I had in the router to make the slot, and I've made sure that my fence is perfectly square to the table. Now it's a little bit too much material to form this dovetail with one pass, so that was the first 2 passes. I'll fine-tune the fence until this tail fits perfectly in that column. All right, let's see how we did. All right, well, at this point, that's a bit snug, but that's what I want. Can always fine-tune it later. Now I'll lay out the shape and cut it. Once the leg has been sanded smooth at the oscillating spindle sander, I'm ready to put on this piece of hardware, this brass end with this swiveling wheel. What I need to do is form a tenon on the end of the leg that fits inside the hardware. So I've laid it out carefully, and I'm going to use a hand saw to make the shoulder cuts. Now here I've taken a 1/2-inch brad point bit to relieve some material from the leg to receive the pin that's inside the casting for the swivel. Okay, now that little mortise is for the tab on this piece of hardware. You can slide right in there and then the screw will secure it. And that's pretty good. 2 more to go before I leave tonight. Oh, good morning. Last night I did finish fitting all those casters onto the bottom of the legs. And I want to taper this leg. I want to keep it full width here at the dovetail, and I want to taper it down to the edge of the caster. So I've put a couple pencil marks there. Now I could do this with a handheld belt sander or on the joiner, but recently we received this machine for the shop. It's an oscillating belt sander. It goes up and down as it spins around. I place the stock against this stop, put a little more pressure on the end where I want to remove the material, and get a nice straight line from top to bottom. Let's take another look at the prototype. The next thing to do is to make this double bead on each edge of the leg. That's done at the router table. Well, now we're ready to glue those legs into the column. A little bit of that brown glue, some on the dovetail and in the socket. These should just slide in. No clamp should be necessary. That's not going anywhere. Each caster is secured to the leg with 3 screws. Let's turn our attention to this box which surrounds the top of the pedestal. These pieces have tenons which fit into mortises which are in the side pieces. I've clamped the 2 pieces together that are going to get the mortises to give me a wider base for the router. I've laid out each mortise, set up a straight edge, and I'm using a 1/2-inch bit in my router. I have this nice corner chisel to square up the hole. Now I'm beginning to form the tenons on the pieces that will go into those mortises. I've made a shoulder cut on each face. Now I'll make some adjustments to the blade to nibble away the top and bottom of the tenon. To complete each tenon with the cheek cuts, I'm using my tenoning jig, which safely holds the piece vertical while I run it through the saw. Let's take another look at our prototype. The way the leaves are going to be supported when the table is extended is on this rail. The rail has a groove, and that groove fits over a tongue which I've made on the side piece of the box that receives the top of the pedestal. The rail is sandwiched between that side piece and this stiffener along the bottom of the table. It's a very simple system. I've already machined the tongue on one side of the box. Here's the other piece. I've set up the table saw with my stacked dado cutter, sacrificial fence, and a featherboard. While I still have the dado set up in the table saw, I've taken a nice straight piece of mahogany to make another rail. I've tipped the table up so you can see under it a little bit better. This is one of 4 thumb screws that goes through the frame, which is attached to the bottom and into the pedestal. That's what holds everything together. I need a through hole for the bolt, and I need to mortise out for this piece of brass trim. Now there's a series of counterbores and through holes for the screws which will secure the frame to the underside of the top. And those are held in place with a couple brass screws. All right, now I'm ready for a little bit of assembly. Glue on the mortises and the tenons, and when we have it all together, I'll clamp it up. Now here's the piece that's going to go on top of the pedestal. I'll be drilling a hole in it later to drop over the dowel portion of it, and that sits in this frame. Now I want it to be even with the pieces that go across the table, these. So I've added some shims for that. This piece drops into place, and now that it's in place, I can make holes in that piece for the threaded portion of these thumb screws. To do that, I simply take my 3/8" bit, put it through the hole I drilled earlier, and drill. All right, for the last few minutes I've been making a mortise around that hole that I just drilled, and that receives this nut into which the rod or the bolt will thread. And that has to be flush. Now there's a 2-inch hole in the top of our pedestal base for the tenon on the column. Well, now I'm ready to put the frame on the underside of our top, which is sized. And I'm only going to put some glue in the center of these pieces that go across the grain. I want to allow for some movement of the top. The outer holes, you'll notice that I've drilled a 3/8" counterbore, and that'll allow a little flex in the screws should the top move. On the pieces that run parallel to the grain, I'm not going to put any glue, just the screws will do. The piece I'm working on now is really a cleat that's going to get screwed to the underside of the top. It's a nice rugged piece. It goes against the rail, it'll guide the rail, and it'll also keep the top from cupping. It has a decorative cut on the end, and the rail will get the same treatment later. Now these pieces get counterbores and through holes just like the pieces on the frame of the pedestal. Now this cleat that goes across the grain again just gets a little dab of glue in the middle, and I'll put it up against that sliding rail. I'm going to take a doubled up piece of paper and put it on each end. I want a little bit of clearance. I don't want it to be too tight. Now I'm ready to treat the edge of the tabletop. I'm going to use a 3/4 inch radius to get this profile with a little lip here. And then a smaller radius just to knock off that bottom corner. So finally we can attach the top to the column of the pedestal base. Just drilling a pilot hole at a slight angle. A little countersink, and some nice long 3-inch screws. That'll hold it in place. Now with the top dropped on that base, these thumb screws will hold everything in place. All right, the rails are in place, And here's one of the leaves from the prototype, and I wanted to show you once again how that's made. It's an 18-inch wide piece with some cleats, just like on the other sections of the top, snuged in place, and the edge is treated the same way as I treated the tabletop. It drops in over those rails, just snug enough to be in there, and then if I push on it a bit, it all comes together. Now with one leaf, we're 4 foot by 7 foot 6. I'm going to make an additional leaf which will give us 4 foot by 9 foot. Plenty of room for the family for Christmas dinner. Now a little more sanding and some adjustment of these pieces and it'll be ready for the finishing room. Well, I've set out all the pieces of the top of our dining table so I could show you the various steps in the finishing process. And it starts over here. After the top was sanded, I gave it a coat of red mahogany oil-based stain. Then I sealed that stain with what's known as a 1-pound cut of wax-free shellac, and then sanded it down. It's pretty smooth, but I can still feel the pores of the wood, the recesses in the wood. So now what I want to do is use a filler. This is a oil-based filler, and when you drag it on across the grain, and what you're really doing is working it into the pores. And you put it all over the top and let it sit on there for a little while. And after it sets for a bit, I can take a rubber squeegee and remove it across the grain. It's important to do that because if I go with the grain, I'll pull the filler out of the pores. After I get the bulk of it off, there'll still be a little bit remaining on the surface, and when that hazes over, I take a piece of burlap, wipe it across the grain, and finally in a figure-8 shape, being sure not to pull the filler out of the pores. After that dries overnight, I sand it down, and you can see that now we have a top that's very smooth, almost like a mirror. But I'm a little concerned about the color. I like the grain, but I have a dark color here and a light color right next to it, so I want to try to blend that. For that, I'm going to use a gel stain. This is a dark mahogany stain, and what I'm going to do is wipe it on. It's almost like a polish in a way on the whole piece. Let it set for just a minute or so, and then start to wipe it off and see if I can blend those colors together. Well, now that it's set up for a few minutes, I'm going to start to wipe it off. It's sort of like polishing your shoes. I'm going to blend it in. Don't leave any thick bits of it. And this will take a little while. Well, that's turning out pretty good so far. Now, if I want to make it a little bit darker, I can wait 6 hours and then apply another coat of the gel stain. And that's where this section is right here. 2 coats of gel stain, lightly sanded with 600 grit sandpaper. And now I'm ready for the final protective coat, which is going to be a high gloss polyurethane. A few coats of this, and we'll be ready for a holiday feast. That's what I'm looking for. Being able to see myself in the finish. So far we've put on 3 coats of a wipe-on gloss polyurethane. And we found the best way to put it on is to take a cotton cloth, fold it up, soak it in the polyurethane, and use it like a squeegee. Just wipe it on with the grain, nice thin coat. The poly dries quickly so we're not getting any dust specks. The more coats of poly you put on, the more protection you're going to have. Well, there you have it, an extending dining room table. Perfect for any family celebration, and it was fun to build. Let me show you what we're going to build next time. We call it a mission-style desk. It was inspired by an L and J.G. Stickley original that we found in a gallery in downtown Boston. We'll show you that next time, and then we'll build our own mission-style desk right here in the New Yankee Workshop.
If you enjoyed this New Yankee project, please visit our website at newyankee.com for a complete online catalog of all the other projects you've seen Norm build here in the New Yankee Workshop.